Welcome into the Talkin Tide podcast on the Pigskin Podcast Network. I'm Chase Goodbread, sports columnist with the Tuscaloosa News, joined by longtime senior analyst with BamaOnline.com, Travis Reier, previewing Alabama, Mississippi State with this Wednesday night edition of Talkin Tide. You can get the Talkin Tide podcast wherever you prefer to get your podcasts, including Apple Podcasts. And as well, you can catch us live on Facebook or YouTube. You can find us on Twitter at Talkin_Tide. Get quick links to all of our podcasts right there. That handle again, TALKIN, no G, underscore Tide. And there you have that. And quickly thanking sponsors, which you'll hear a little bit more about later in the program. That would be Peterbrook Chocolatier of Tuscaloosa, North River Dental Associates, and DraftKings. And with that, Travis, we take a look at this Alabama-Mississippi State game. The Crimson Tide and the Bulldogs each coming off of a loss. Alabama, of course, falls on the road to Tennessee. Mississippi State took a step backwards against those Kentucky Wildcats. And this a game, I looked this up, Mississippi State has drawn Alabama coming off of an Alabama loss 6 times now in the Nick Saban era, owing largely to the fact that for most of those years, the SEC schedule makers placed MSU right after LSU on the Alabama schedule. I think 4 of those 6 games have come off an LSU game. But Mississippi State, not unfamiliar, Travis, with the position of having to take on an Alabama team coming off a loss.
Yeah, even last year after the Texas A&M loss in College Station, it was straight to Starkville for that Alabama team. And yeah, I hit on that at BOL earlier in the week too. It just seems like it's always Mississippi State for Alabama after a loss. And a couple of teams dealing with turmoil and really a tragic set of events here in the Mississippi State program here in the last 24 hours or so. Is Sam Westmoreland, the 19-year-old member of the Mississippi State football team, tragically passes away. And Alabama still in the news for far secondary reasons than losing a teammate and a friend and a brother and whatever else with the lingering situation with Tennessee. So it's just been a rough week in a lot of ways, a weird week in some others, and we'll see how this plays out Saturday night.
The Alabama-Tennessee game just doesn't want to die, right?
Yeah, I mean, it's the loss that keeps on losing all year round, Clark.
It's unreal. It's not been easy to turn attention to the Bulldogs for Alabama fans or media between the situation with Jermaine Burton, which Nick Saban addressed briefly on Wednesday, a disciplinary action of some kind that's obviously going to be handled internally after a situation where he made some contact with a female Tennessee fan on his way off the field. And you had this video circulate, Travis, this week as well from, not sure if you caught this one or not, but a video that was shot from behind the goalposts on the game-winning field goal that appears to suggest that Byron Young might have got a piece of that thing.
Yeah.
Maybe that's why it was a wobbler.
Yeah, that was a couple of things on that. I had some 1990 flashbacks on a couple of those plays because Byron Young, if he didn't get a piece of it, it looked like he very well could have, because he came pretty clean right up the middle if you watch the replay.
Yeah.
And that could have been a situation where Alabama gets a block and its own kick 6, right? Maybe somebody scoops that baby up on the final play of the game and goes the other way and scores, but it didn't happen. Given the trajectory and the lack of rotation of anything resembling a well-struck football, kicked football, you had to wonder about that. But with the Jermaine Burton situation, I mean, obviously, as rough and tough as it might be after a game like that, and even if you're dealing with some maybe personal frustrations, you got to keep your hands to yourself. I know that's difficult. That being said, I don't know what the SEC is going to do about crowd control, specifically with Alabama, because people aren't rushing the field for Vanderbilt wins, okay? They're not rushing the field for beating South Carolina. They're not rushing the field, best I can tell, when Georgia does lose. I don't know the last time Georgia lost a road game other than Alabama a couple of years ago, but, I don't know. But it's it's really gotten to the point of beyond the point of just out of control. And you can talk about fines and things like this. I don't know. And I know this isn't realistic. Maybe we got to have like a fine for the other 13 teams in football and then an Alabama fine. You instead of getting fined 100K, if it's Alabama, you get fined $1 million. I don't know. I don't know what the answer is. I don't know if uh, the SEC should allot more money for security for road games involving Alabama. Do we need to do this thing like we do in basketball where you'll see after a Kentucky or a Duke loses right when the gun goes or the buzzer hits, you see them come out with these ropes right around the team to kind of keep them
Right.
sectioned off, and then it's almost like a cattle move into the locker room or into the tunnel. These are all things we got to consider as long as Nick Saban's in Tuscaloosa, it seems like, because it seems like every one of these ramps up a little bit more. And this is the fan base that did throw mustard bottles and everything else just a year ago in a loss to Ole Miss. So I don't really have a great answer.
One of these days, a rip down up field goal post is going to kill somebody or really hurt somebody too.
You're gonna have people trampled to death, like you've seen in some of the European soccer. I'm afraid anyway. I obviously don't want that to happen, but if we allow this to continue on, or there's just no sense of order, after games like this, sadly, I think you're right. I think it's inevitable.
Question of when and not if, unfortunately. I know that about it. All right. Alabama, Mississippi State. We will turn to the upcoming game. 6 p.m. Central Time start. Going to be on ESPN, of course, at Bryant-Denny Stadium. Travis, the Alabama offense comes in certainly after an outstanding performance against Tennessee. Bryce Young comes off that injury, throws for 455 against the Volunteers. He's obviously good to go. Jahmyr Gibbs hot as well. He's rushed for well over 400 yards over his last 3 games, more than 100 in each of those, certainly. So Mississippi State's got his hands full, very much so, on defense. And this is a Mississippi State defense, Travis, that had higher expectations coming into the season, had a solid year defensively last year, brought back a lot of starters, and hadn't been terrible, but has been pretty average in the SEC. I believe they're middle of the pack at best, both against run and pass. And although they are 5-2, that's probably not quite what Mike Leach was looking for.
No, I think that fan base is really disappointed with the Kentucky loss. And when you combine it with the LSU loss earlier, because I think if you're a Mississippi State fan this year, you're thinking we should be able to get a split of those road games, right? LSU and Kentucky. And it just didn't happen. And really, both were games where at the half, Mississippi State was in a good spot on the road and just couldn't close out those games. And last week, it was Christian Rodriguez that literally ran over Mississippi State in that Kentucky win, even with Will Levis back in the lineup. So, I love Emmanuel Forbes as a cornerback. I've talked about him, written about him in the past. And this is a guy with 13 career interceptions, 5 of them he's returned for touchdowns. So he's reminiscent of some Alabama corners from previous years, Chase, in that he not only picks off passes, he takes them to the house after he does it.
Yeah, 5 picks for him on the year. That leads the SEC. He's got 6 pass breakups to go with that. I asked Nick Saban about him just here this evening. Saban very impressed with what he's done. He's a game changer. And, if Alabama had a monster wide receiver one, right, like a Jamison Williams, for instance, last year, maybe you'd expect to see Emmanuel Forbes just kind of shadow him wherever he goes. That's not the case with this Alabama receiving core, though. So you would think with the way Bryce Young has kind of spread the ball around to a wide receiving core that's been inconsistent on the whole, that we'll see Forbes not locked in on any one receiver, but matched up with. He's going to play where Mississippi State wants him to play, and whoever's in front of him, that's who he's going to get.
Yeah, he impressed me as a true freshman against Alabama 2 years ago, he took some serious lumps against Devontae Smith as a first-year guy. But the thing was, he kept coming back and he kept giving it to Devontae. He never backed down in that game. And he's just continued to improve. And he's a smart player too. You watch him, he anticipates some things. He took Will Levis's lunch money on the pick six last week. So, you're right though, for the Alabama receiving core with Burton uncertain. What about Ja'Cory Brooks? Talk about a guy that might be trending in the right direction. Chase had a couple of drops at Arkansas. Didn't see much of the field after that. But these last couple of weeks, he's picked it back up, had a couple of big catches against Texas A&M 2 weeks ago. And then he probably should have had a 100-yard game against Tennessee. He lost one of his biggest receptions, longest receptions, to a holding penalty on Jace McClellan. But, this is a guy that looks like he's moving in the right direction, and they need him to.
They absolutely need him to. And of course, he came up with what certainly one of the biggest catches of that Tennessee game. He's the guy that got him in field goal range with the catch at the end to set up Will Reichard's failed field goal attempt from 50 yards. So, Ja'Cory Brooks has been playing better of late, played really well against Vanderbilt. I think it was the week after that where he had the drop issues. But that's something to watch for sure. Defensively for Alabama, Travis taking on Will Rogers, who's averaging 335 passing yards per game. Really big year, obviously, for Rogers. Spreads the ball a lot like Bryce Young. He likes to spread it around. His backs catch a ton of balls. His top two running backs have 62 catches between them, or 61. Talking about Dylan Johnson and Jaquavius Marks. A lot of these completions for Will Rogers aren't for a lot of yards at the catch point. But this air raid offense gets those guys in space and forces a defense to make open field tackles, and it can be a matchup problem.
Yeah, you do have to tackle in space, and those backs absolutely are critical. They've taken a step up. You say this and people kind of laugh under their breath, but Mississippi State is running for about 95 yards per game this season. And I know, again, people hear that and go, wow, this guy's making a point about the Mississippi State run game. Well, it's pretty damn good when you consider 2 years ago in Mike Leach's first season, they ran for 43 yards per game. And that's with the understanding, as you outlined, they throw it to the backs enough that it is essentially an extension of the run game. It augments the run game, how they utilize those backs in the passing game. I guess the concern I have for Mississippi State this week is I think Dylan Johnson, one of those two backs, along with Woody Marks, sustained a lower extremity injury in the first half at Kentucky last week. And I'm not sure how much we're going to see of Dylan Johnson this week. Maybe he'll be able to go, but it could be a situation where it's a whole lot of Woody Marks. And they like to use those guys in the game together too. And I think Johnson, in terms of pass protection, probably the better of the two there. So Johnson gives them a little more thump than Marks does.
What about the similarities between Tennessee's offense and Mississippi State's, Travis? Does Alabama draw anything from the fact that those two offenses they're not exactly the same, but you wonder if it might help Alabama's defense a little bit to play these two teams back to back from a practice standpoint? Josh Heupel played for Mike Leach in college at Oklahoma. Leach making mention of that earlier this week. And the air raid offense has so many branches and leaves on it now, and coaches create cousins out of it, right? I mean, one is not necessarily the same as the other, but I do think it could help Alabama's defense a little bit to be dealing with some of this stuff 2 weeks in a row.
Yeah, some of the matchups that Mississippi State can get you in are similar, but really for me, when I look at Tennessee's offense and I look at Leach's, it's like Leach's is your dad's Cutlass and yours is the Tesla.
Yeah.
Now, maybe another analogy should be made in relation to the speed that Tennessee operates, because Mississippi State doesn't bring that. So that's the biggest thing you like for Alabama as much as anything this week, is that Mississippi State is not going at warp speed. And that means you get opportunities to get your sub packages on the field more in a situational basis. As we talked about in the run up to Tennessee, that was going to be nearly impossible against that offense. This week, if you want to see the cheetah package, if you want to switch up between your nickel and dime, I think pretty much you're going to be able to do that throughout the game. So that should benefit Alabama, which has been able to play a good bit of zone against Mississippi State each of the last 2 seasons and not need to bring extra guys, maybe some simulated pressures at Will Rogers, but it's been tough for Rogers. He had a rough outing last week at Kentucky, and in the last 2 games, the first 2 games that he's played against Alabama, he's thrown 5 picks, 2 of which were returned for touchdowns. So this has been a little bit of a house of horrors situation for Will Rogers.
Question from one of our viewers coming in, Travis. Paul Malone wants to know, we going to see Harrell in this game? Talking, of course, about Tyler Harrell, the transfer from Louisville. He's been injured with a foot injury for much of this season, was ready to go. He's been ready to go and was certainly available to play against Tennessee. Travis, I guess with Nick Saban's comments about his willingness to maybe change some things up personnel-wise, if we don't see Tyler Harrell against Mississippi State, there shouldn't be much reason to expect to see him going forward at all, I wouldn't think.
No, you're getting pretty much, and I know a lot of folks will say, well, you get to the bye week, and then that gives you another week to maybe ramp them up some more before you go to LSU. But, if a guy hasn't really seen the field much up to the bye week, are you really going to put him out there against LSU and Ole Miss? Maybe you would. I mean, this isn't a true freshman. We know that. He has experience, played a lot at Louisville, so there is a difference there. They could damn sure use him. I mean, the guy that we saw at Louisville that can take the top off of a defense, that to me, it's kind of amazing, the numbers that Bryce continues to put up. He put up 455 at Tennessee, and there wasn't a Jamison Williams or even a John Mechie in that rotation.
Right.
That's just how efficient he was with the football, and how even when there were some tight windows and some guys went up and made some plays for him. Jermaine Burton, speaking of Jermaine, he made a 50-50 play on about a 33-yard pickup. But for the most part, Bryce is having to fit the ball into some tight windows, whether we're talking a short, intermediate, or vertical game.
He is. And Cam Latu made another nice contested catch as well for Alabama. So guys have made some plays, but separation has definitely been an issue for this receiving core, which you're a little surprised to see for a program that brings in top-rated signing classes pretty much year in, year out. Maybe Tyler Harrell does carve out a role. I would think, though, that if that's going to happen, we begin to see some sign of it very, very quickly starting this weekend.
I'm with you. Like we just talked about, I know you could get to the bye week and have some more time, but I would think this is, if it's going to start to happen, and Aaron Anderson too, maybe. I think the problem for Anderson, though, is they already have guys like him that are contributing, like Isaiah Bond, like Kobe Prentice, JoJo Earl back now. So they've got that kind of guy. Yeah. And Anderson can stretch you too. But Tyler Harrell is like world-class vertical speed, and they don't have that right now.
The Vegas man, Travis, he's got Alabama by 21 in this game. Seems a little high to me. The official give out from Chase Goodbread and the column this week is going to be those Vanderbilt Commodores getting 14 on the road at Missouri. I'm feeling it, Travis, if I'm giving out Vanderbilt. But I like VU plus
AJ Swan. Yeah. AJ Swan. Will Shepherd
trying to get to 7-1 against that all spread. So
yeah. I mean, it's some of these lines get tougher, don't they? It seems like they do. It seems like once the man kind of gets his feet under him a little bit, you got to get the man in week 0, week 1, and get off to that hot start before he kind of really gets his wits about himself. Because once he does that, the results seem to be predictable. What is it? Alabama minus 21.5. What are we talking about?
Yeah, 21 and a half. Yeah.
I like Alabama to cover that this week.
Do you?
Well, I mean, last 2 games against Leach, 90-9. I mean,
it's been ugly.
It's been ugly, and I do think that, and it hadn't been an easy week for Alabama. It's been a tragic week for Mississippi State. So you don't know how any of this is going to play into it, if at all. But man, I've watched 3 Mike Leach teams as a head coach go against Alabama, 1 at Texas Tech, 2 now at Mississippi State, and his teams have scored 1 touchdown, kicked 3 field goals, or 4 field goals. So I got to see it from State before I believe it. And again, I think there are a couple injuries perhaps on that offensive side of the ball, one on the OL that they had last week too, that, make me think Alabama might be able to get there.
Would that have been an 05 Cotton Bowl squad you're referring to?
That was it.
Yeah.
That was it.
Yeah.
Speaking of ugly field goals, Jamie Christensen. How about that one?
Mike Shula's finest squad.
It was. And, in fairness to Jamie, that playing surface that day at the old Cotton Bowl, oh my God. Yeah, it was less than ideal, put it that way.
All right, the Talkin Tide podcast on the Pigskin Podcast Network. Moving on now, we're going to thank a couple of sponsors for you here really quickly. Going to start out by telling you all about North River Dental Associates and that fine service you get from Dr. Jack Smalley and his great staff of dental hygienists. They can get you taken care of with porcelain veneers, cosmetic dentistry, pediatric dentistry, endodontics, everything you might need. My wife just broke a tooth the other day. She's going to get in to see Dr. Jack. She'll get taken care of very quickly and easily. He'll do a fantastic job. The teeth whitening services, always very popular at Dr. Jack's place as well. Location convenient for sure. 1100 Fairfax Park, right off of Watermelon Road, next to West Alabama Pediatrics. And on a routine cleaning, you are typically going to be in and out in less than an hour. You can't beat that. Give them a call. The number is 752-3506, or you can visit northriverdentist.com to make an appointment. It is North River Dental Associates.
I'm going to tell you about Peterbrook Chocolatier out there at 1530 McFarland Boulevard North in the Indian Hills section of Tuscaloosa. Wow. Halloween rapidly approaching, and it's not officially fall, and it's certainly not Halloween if you don't get by there, Peterbrook Chocolatier, and get yourself one of those caramel hand-dipped apples at Peterbrook Chocolatier. They're going to dip them in that house-made caramel, and then they're going to hit them with that freshly tempered chocolate, whether it's the white, the milk, or the dark chocolate. And then if you'd like some accessories to your caramel chocolate dipped apple, they're going to be able to hook you up with maybe some graham cracker dust, maybe some nuts on there, maybe a little white chocolate or milk chocolate or dark chocolate drizzle to finish it off. Goodbread. They got you covered. Peterbrook Chocolatier, 1530 McFarland Boulevard North in the Indian Hills section of Tuscaloosa.
If you got a sweet tooth, and yours truly certainly does, there's no better place to go in Tuscaloosa than Peterbrook Chocolatier. Finally, going to tell you all about DraftKings, our corporate sponsor of the NFL action in full swing now at the DraftKings Sportsbook, an official sports betting partner of the NFL. We're talking touchdowns, big plays, and bigger wins as new customers can bet just $5 on any NFL team to win and get $200 in free bets if they do. Use that promo code TPPN. That'll help us out here, and they will get you taken care of. Lots of great action in the NFL this weekend. You got Falcons at Bengals. You got Bucks at Panthers, Browns at Ravens, Jets at Broncos. Those Packers trying to get on track on the road against the Washington Commanders. Plenty of games, plenty of lines. So download that DraftKings Sportsbook app now. Use the promo code TPPN, and you'll get $200 in free bets on a $5 bet if your team wins when you place that bet on any game with promo code TPPN, only at the DraftKings Sportsbook, an official sports betting partner of the NFL. Minimum age and eligibility restrictions apply. Travis, we will dive into a couple of SEC games this weekend really quickly here. Kind of a light slate. The highest occurrence of idle weeks in the entire SEC schedule is this week. We got 5 SEC teams sitting this week out. No other week of the season has that many. So a light schedule for sure. Even lighter considering Tennessee is taking on UT Martin. You want to talk about the game that won't go away. You think they're not you think they're not going to keep talking about Alabama for another week with UT Martin coming to town in Knoxville? Come on.
Well, and you know what? You got Ty Simpson's dad as the head coach at Tennessee Martin. So you can't get away from the Alabama
That's right.
connections. Yeah, Jason Martin, head coach of the Skyhawks, I believe they are, of UT Martin. So yeah. I think Ole Miss LSU has some potential. Goodbread. What about you? I like that game. Texas A&M. You never know with Texas A&M and South Carolina playing at home. I mean, there's the potential there. Even Vanderbilt, Missouri, other than Tennessee going non-con against UTM, game should be competitive. I don't know. I guess I'm not expecting Alabama, Mississippi State to maybe be as close as you do.
Ole Miss and LSU, I think, does have a lot of potential to be competitive. I think Ole Miss can hang there. And look, LSU's run defense has not been good this season, and that does not bode well against Ole Miss, which is running the ball on pretty much everybody. But it is at LSU. It's a tough place to play. Ole Miss is still Ole Miss. You question whether or not they're going to stumble at some point. And it's getting a little late for them to stumble, but Death Valley is one place where it can happen to anybody. So I do think that'll be a close game. I look at A&M and South Carolina, Travis, and that just screams to me the kind of game that Jimbo cannot afford to drop. I mean, he's Teflon Jimbo. I know.
Coming off the bye.
Yeah. You can't, if you're Jimbo, you can't drop that one. I don't care if it's on the road. There's going to be calls. There's going to be calls for his head if he drops that one.
This is the potential for a Shane Beamer special too, get the boys fired up. South Carolina has a road win at Kentucky, so it's certainly reasonable to think that the Gamecocks can pull this one off at home. I'm with you. I don't trust A&M a bit. I don't. I'm not picking South Carolina to win this game either, but I don't trust the Aggies here either, because the last time we saw the Aggies, played Alabama tough. It looks like they got this thing maybe going in the right direction. We'll see.
Vanderbilt at Missouri, kind of a seller game there. What are your thoughts on the Commodores taking on the Tigers? Can they pull off an upset outright or no? I think Vandy can hang in this one. I'm giving out that 14.
I think Vandy can hang. I think maybe Missouri's a little better than we're giving them credit for, because you think about the games they've lost. They either gave away a game at Auburn or, look at the close losses. Georgia, Florida on the road. Not that Florida's world beaters. We saw LSU go into the swamp and win last Saturday night. But, I think this game, the similarities are many. I think even in the team colors and even in terms of maybe roster strength.
That is going to do it for this edition of the Talkin Tide podcast. We're going to be coming a quick programming note for you. We're going to come at you with our Alabama Mississippi State recap episode a little earlier than usual on Sunday. So you can look for that on Sunday afternoon rather than late Sunday evening. So looking forward to that. That'll be the next time Travis and I come back at you. So for Travis Reier of BamaOnline.com, I'm Chase Goodbread, sports columnist with the Tuscaloosa News, and we will talk to you Sunday afternoon here on Talkin Tide.